are you? So glad that we are able to have our time together tonight. Such an awesome time. Tonight we're going to be talking in reverence to what we call the Black History Month. We know that with all cultures, we all have a history, and it's not just limited to a month or a day. We have a history. So, and if you have just started with us, you realize that we come from everyday life moments, but from a Christian perspective. And our title, of course, we say that it's Love and Strength for Everyday Moments. And if you're joining us, we're talking in reverence to the month of February, talking about Black history. Africa was never your problem. Africa was never your problem. First, we're going to start by talking about a little bit of the ancient Egyptian culture. We know that there were many inventions made during that time. We know that religion was a very strong part of ancient Egypt, and we refer to that as mythology, the Egyptian mythology, because they had many gods. But their belief was that in the beginning there was nothing but a chaotic swirling of waters, and out of that rose a small hill that they called Bin, and on top of that hill stood a great god called Atum, who spoke creation into being by drawing on the power of Heka, the god of magic. Okay, there's different versions of that. Some say that Atum created the world by first fashioning Ptah, the creator god, who then does the actual work. And then there's another version that says that Ptah he first appeared and he created Atum. And then another version that during that time when he created Atum started mating with his shadow to create Shu, meaning the air, and Tefnut, the moisture, who then goes on to give birth to the world and other gods. The Egyptian concept of the soul regarded it as being compared into 9 parts. The Kat, which was the physical body. I'm sure I'm not pronouncing any of this correctly, so please charge it to my head, not to my heart. Ka, one's double form. Ba was a human-headed bird aspect which could spread between the earth and the heavens. Shuat was the shadow self. Ak was the immortal, transformed self. Sahu and Sekim aspects were of the Ak. And Ab was the heart, the source of good and evil. And Ren was one secret name. The Egyptians felt that if someone knew their real name, that you had control over them. So they gave themselves other names. And if they happened to become Pharaoh or in leaderships, they usually took on the names of the former Pharaoh. And they might have had nicknames. We know that they did a lot of water sports and things of that nature. But let's talk about the distinctions of the Egyptian culture. We're going to get down to the scripture portion of where we're going tonight with this. But the distinctions in the ancient Egyptian culture, among the lower classes, homes were built and mud bricks baked in the sun. Now, let me give reference to the credit to whom wrote this, because I did not. This is study that came from Joshua Mark, and also I'm going to be reading some other things that were pertaining to this topic, and it comes from Ancient Egyptian Encyclopedia, and recognition to some African American inventors, and this came from a list that was in the U.S. Patent Office that was once submitted by a former employee of the U.S. Patent Office back in the late 1800s to early 1900s, and his name was Henry Baker. So there will be some references made from their input, their studies, and their documents that they had submitted. So, class distinctions in Egyptian culture. Among the lower classes, home was built of mud, bricks baked in the sun. The more affluent a citizen, the thicker the home. Wealthier people had homes constructed of a double layer or more, or brick, while poor people's houses were only one brick wide. But see, they already had bricks homes. Wood was scarce and was only used for doorways and window sills, again in wealthier homes. And the roof was considered another room in the house, where gatherings were routinely held, as the interior of the homes were often dimly lit. Clothing was simple linen, undyed, with the men wearing a knee-length skirt or loincloth, and the women light ankle-length dresses or robes, which concealed or exposed their breasts, depending on the fashion at a particular time. It would seem that a woman's level of undress, however, was indicative of her social status throughout much of Egyptian history. Dancing girls, female magicians, and servants and slaves are routinely shown as naked or nearly naked, while a lady of the house is fully clothed, even during those times when exposed breasts were a fashion statement. Even so, women were free to dress as they pleased, and there was never a prohibition at any time in Egyptian history on female fashion. A woman's exposed breasts were considered a natural, normal fashion choice, and it was in no way deemed immodest or provocative. It was understood that the goddess Isis had given equal rights to both men and women, and therefore men had no right to dictate how a woman, even one's own wife, should attire herself. Children wore little or no clothing until puberty. Then it goes on to talk about the marriages was not arranged among the lower class. And there seems to have been no formal marriage ceremony. A man could carry gifts to the house of his intended bride, and if the gifts were accepted, she would take up residence with him. The average age of the bride was 13 and that of the groom 18 to 21. A contract would be drawn up portioning a man's access to his wife, portioning a man's access to his wife and children, and this allotment could not be rescinded except on grounds of adultery, which was defined as sex with a married woman, not a married man. So if he's a married man, it wasn't considered adultery. Egyptian women could own land, homes, run businesses, and preside over temples, and could even be pharaohs, as in the example of Queen Hatshepsut, or earlier Queen Sobi-Khnofru. And they were saying that the women were treated in high esteem. She was prestigious, and as a matter of fact, they said that Egypt treated its women better than any of the other major civilizations of the ancient world. The Egyptians believed that joy and happiness were legitimate goals of life and regarded home and family as the major source of delight. And because of this belief, women enjoyed a higher prestige in Egypt than in any other culture in the ancient world. Okay, now we're going to the word, where we find, of course, in Genesis 50, where Joseph was sent to Egypt by his brothers, who were very jealous of him. He was his father's favorite son because he was the eldest son of the wife that he was in love with. Jacob had two wives. his father-in-law gave him the eldest daughter, but he was in love with the youngest daughter. Now, it said that in the scripture that Rachel had weak eyes. Doesn't mean that she wasn't beautiful. Where they were, it says that it could be that the sand was always in her eyes and her eyes was irritated, or that, that she more than likely, just had some irritation in her eyes. It wasn't that she was beautiful, because when they said that she was comely, the misinterpretation of that, the meaning of that word. In our culture, it may mean something else, but comely meant she was a beautiful woman. But Jacob he saw more beauty in Rachel. Rachel was out there with the men all the time. She knew how they talked. She knew how they acted. She was a shepherdess, so she was around men. And Leah was a woman that was more restrained and defined. She was at home more. Now, it showed that just because Jacob valued her more, the daddy valued the other one more. See, we preached about that one time. I was in a ministry one time, and to tell you, just because you're not Jacob's choice, know that you're God's choice. Oh, yeah. So, but we're going to this Egypt. Joseph was sent to Egypt as a slave because his brothers even lied to their father, telling their father that Joseph was dead. They took his clothes and tore it up and allowed some animal blood to be on it and said, "Is this not your sons?" And here Joseph was brought into a prison for something he didn't even do. And he had so much favor that the Lord allowed him to go into one of Pharaoh's soldiers' home, and he was running things until his wife lied on him and said that he tried to rape her, and that wasn't true. It was the other way around. She tried to rape him on many occasions. And he said, "How could I do this? Very vile thing." See, and just notice we said in Egypt's culture that if that was the husband who was having sexual intercourse with anybody else, it wouldn't be considered adultery. But if that woman did, it was adultery. And so Joseph was learning all of these cultures. His dad was teaching him math and all of these things. But in Egypt, the technology was already advanced. We're talking about in Egypt where even back in the ancient, let's go back to some inventions that they made. It says by 1600 BCE, the water clock was used in Egypt and was the calendar. And it has been suggested they even understood the principle of electricity because they had the dendrolite. And this is all the way back then. And the Egyptians seemed little different from other ancient cultures, like the people of Mesopotamia, India, China, and Greece. They lived mostly in modest homes and raised families. But the culture of the Greek and Romans have engrafted a lot of their belief system, a lot of their worship system upon the Egyptian culture. As you know, that they had many gods. And the Greek and Roman culture does also. We even have that trickling down even in the body of Christ, or what is known to be a body of Christ. Christianity in Africa. Africa is one of the largest and most populous continents in the world, as well as the birthplace of humanity. Christianity is the world's largest religion, practiced by roughly 2.2 billion people worldwide. So how does the world's largest religion look in this major continent? And they said to understand what Christianity means in Africa today, we need to look at the spread of this religion in Africa across history. They said that the first evangelist that had gone to northern Africa was Mark, one of the Lord's apostles. And he first started preaching Christianity in Alexandria, Egypt, which is northern Africa. And Christianity had been practiced even earlier in most of Europe, but in northern Egypt, all the way back before, like they said, is BC, right after Christ, and many years before what we know of. It's like as early as 327 BC. The Coptic or Egyptian branch of Christianity took root and began to spread across northern Africa. The religion was popular largely amongst the lower classes, although it also seems to have been favored by many scholars in Alexandria. In particular, it became seen as a form of resistance against the pagan Roman Empire that was securing more and more of a hold in northern Africa. See, those of the upper echelon still believed in their many gods, and that's what the Greeks and Romans did. They saw that it was lower standard to have one God. But the Christianity was already going throughout Africa. And Christianity spread as a popular religion across northern Africa, reaching into what is now Ethiopia and other regions along the Red Sea. For a long time it was practiced by the people, but still persecuted widely by various kingdoms and states, including those areas controlled by the Romans. So here we go. We're talking about a religion that says they're Christian, but yet they know that their very source was to annihilate Christians. And they gave Alexander, which Alexandria was named after, gave him credit for establishing Christianity. But when you study it, you realize that he still had other gods. He was dealing with dark mysticism, and he was dealing with Satanism, other things. And so he was mixing the two. And you see how that has continued into the church now, where they have these deities in their church, and a lot of people don't know that. And then they're worshiping saints and they're worshiping people, making them idols, and the Lord doesn't like that. So we go on, and it says that even as 327 CE, that Christianity was there. And King Azana, Axiom was ruled by a man named King Azana, who around 327 CE became one of the first rulers in the world to make Christianity the official religion of his kingdom. And this was Africa. Axiom was the first African kingdom to fully embrace Christianity. And it became a major center for the religion, as well as the home to the Ethiopian Orthodox Church. As a wealthy and powerful, internationally respected state, in many ways, it was seen as the first real Christian success story and ideal model for other kingdoms. In fact, the city was so important to early Christians that it has been proposed as a potential resting place for the lost Ark of the Covenant, saying that it was in the Ethiopian church. And as a matter of fact, that's where the scientists found whom they felt, and they said that has been more likely than not, was the bones of Eve. It was found in Ethiopia. So then it's talk about Christianity and Islam. Christianity became the de facto religion of northern Africa, at least until the 7th century, when a new religion called Islam swept across the region. Early Islam was followed by some extremely militaristic states that marched across northern Africa, resulting in a wave of conversion because they were forcing people to become. The rapid rise of Islam in northern Africa alarmed the Christian kingdoms of Europe. By the medieval era, Europeans had not established contact with sub-Saharan Africa, as they could not manage to cross the desert. However, the rise of Islam helped spur a desire to spread Christianity further south. This was supported with folk tales that emerged about lost ancient Christian kingdoms in the heart of Africa. See, when somebody started, it's always that way. When somebody started talking about the Lord going further down in Africa, they had to make up some mystic reason why they were doing that, and were saying that this some vast wealth of a king, Christian king named Prester John was there, so that's why they went down there to become Christians. But as you can see, these documents were from those that are studying this, and said that it is for certain that Christianity was already in Africa. They were already believing. So this myth that so many have to go there and introduce Christianity is a myth. Where are we going with that? Because let me slow down a little bit. But anyway, I'm so excited. So we're talking about Joseph, Jacob's brother. When he had died, he was sent there ahead of time to prepare his family for what was about to take place. There was so much, there was going to be a worldwide famine. So the Lord showed him a dream, revealed the meaning of a dream that Pharaoh had. And Pharaoh put him over the project where he was putting grain in many bins, and everyone from all over were coming to eat from their table. If you go to Genesis 50:22 through 26, it says, Joseph and his father's family remained in Egypt. Joseph lived 110 years. He saw Ephraim's sons to the third generation. The sons of Manasseh, son of Machir, were recognized by Joseph. Joseph said to his brothers, I am about to die, but God will certainly come to your aid and bring you up from this land to the land he swore to give to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. So Joseph made the sons of Israel take an oath. When God comes to your aid, you are to carry my bones up from here. Joseph died at the age of 110. They embalmed him and placed him in a coffin in Egypt. Joseph's name, just like Yusef, meaning that God will add. When Joseph was born, his mother and father named him that because she knew that God was going to add another son to her, because her sister had many children. As a matter of fact, her sister had 10 sons through a concubine. She had a son with that, and Rachel had some sons through a concubine, her handmaiden, which became a concubine to her husband. But Leah had these sons, and she had one daughter. Rachel ended up giving birth to her 2 children herself. But when she had Joseph, she knew that God was going to add to her. So when the Lord allowed Joseph's bones to be left there, because he in the natural wanted to go back to where the land where his family was promised. Now, he wouldn't be there anyway. His bones was going to be there, because think about that. He was already gone. The Lord wasn't going to bring him back to go to that land, but he wanted to be said for posterity's sake, so the family could know this is who you belong to. That's what that was about. But the Lord had made a home for Joseph there. Egypt couldn't have been that bad because he was the second in command. The Pharaoh loved him. He even gave him his own daughter, part of his kingdom to be his wife. And the Egyptians were able to mingle with the Israelites, the children of Israel, and they just didn't believe in their God because they only had one God. And it was just not heard of to have one God. But this Pharaoh began to believe in the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. But there was a time after he died, some things happened. And then in Exodus 8, it says, a new king who did not know about Joseph came to power in Egypt. He said to his people, look, the Israelite people are more numerous and powerful than we are. Come, let's deal shrewdly with them. Otherwise, they will multiply further. And when war breaks out, they will join our enemies, fight against us, and leave the country. So the Egyptians assigned taskmasters over the Israelites to oppress them with forced labor. They built Pithom and Ramses as supply cities for Pharaoh. But the more they oppressed them, the more they multiplied and spread, so that the Egyptians came to dread the Israelites. They worked the Israelites ruthlessly and made their lives bitter and difficult labor in brick and mortar and in all kinds of field work. They ruthlessly imposed all this work on them. Okay, now, that sounds familiar to what has happened to many of the Africans that were brought over to America for forced labor. And I know that that makes a lot of people uncomfortable, but that's the truth of the history of this country. We do understand that in every nation, there's always going to be someone that wants to lord over another people. And that happened even in America. We had some people family members from Africa that sold their family members unbeknownst to that individual, with promises of wealth and all of these sort of things. And they were brought on ships. They were taken from the culture that they knew all of their lives, the language that they had known all of their lives, and brought to a place where they didn't know anyone. Some of their family members who probably were brought with them, if they had any of their family members, died. Many of them died in these ships along this way. And you're forced into a culture, beaten because you don't understand the language, yelled at because you are treated as if you're stupid. Your mouth is open up to see your teeth. You felt on, dealt with like you're an animal to see that your genitals were intact, and if they were just so that you could be mating and breeding. You were, because of your build and your mind, because they could see the ingenuity in you, you were able to still create, because God gave you those gifts, that some vicious men, not all slave masters were envious or evil, but you had many. And they saw that this was a way to make more money, to get their products out, namely tobacco and cotton and all of these sort of things and other things that would have them to do. Some of them slave masters were so ruthless until they would literally rape the slave men in the middle of the street for everybody to see, to debase him, to emasculate him, to cause them to feel that they have no purpose, no life. And then they would force this same man that you raped, a man raping this man, and then force him to rape his own daughter. Or you go into some other man's wife, and because you are built a certain way, you're going to have children just like that. And all of these things carried on because they felt that they had the right to do that. Now we see this, that's the reason why so many people in the African American culture feel that they have the right to be angry continuously to the point of embitterment because of what had happened in the past. But we see clearly that had happened amongst our own with the children of Israel. Is the Lord so ugly that he's just trying to pull strings and cause people to be ugly towards each other? No. And as we see what happened in Africa had nothing to do with America. So all of these lies today where people are trying to make the African culture seem debased, or they have no intelligence, they have no value but other to be used as stock. And yes, it's still going on today. We still see it. And we still see the lies going on where, the black women, all they're good for is breeding babies and then causing our sisters of the Caucasian race to still look at us side-eye. Some, not all, but that's a lie of the enemy. What happened in Egypt was for a reason, because there was a pharaoh, a new king who was power hungry, decided that he wanted to treat the Israelites a certain way because they were breeding fast, but they were too. The Egyptian culture was life. They believed in life. They believed in family. They believed in even the wealthiest and the lowest were to have their necessary means. They wanted laughter. They wanted joy. They had gardens, and they liked the life of not just to eat from it, but the fact that you could produce it and see the reproduction of nature. All of these things, and they were creating toothbrushes, they were creating brushes, and they were creating all sorts of perfumes and soaps and all of these things because they had to be cleansed. They had to be beautiful. They had to have pleasure in every part of their life. So these things was already established even before when we get to this country where others were trying to say that the African American culture, all they're good for, the women just want to get on welfare. They don't have much aspirations. They don't want to conform to our way. All of these sort of things. That has nothing to do with Africa. That has to do with leaders again, taking power in their hand that God did not give them. When he gives you authority, that authority is to be for the betterment of others. And we still have leaders, even in this country today, trying to continue with this slavery lifestyle. And then you have those that say we're never going to go back to that again. And that's why we have so much divisiveness, and people wonder why the African American culture seems to be so angry, why they are so this. Really, are you seriously? Are you just really just don't understand? I hate to go there. No, I really don't, but y'all know I'm going to go there. This is one of my sayings. Are you stuck on stupid and can't get past go? Are you seriously going there? Why would not someone not be angry? The Israelites were angry too. Why was this going on? Because the Lord sees deeper than we do. There's some things that go on in our lives around us that it's going. If you go through it, it's going to push something out of you, or it's going to reveal more about you. If Africa was so bad, then why is it that when they left, they decided to tell Moses, the Israelites said, it would be better for us if we had stayed in Africa with all that going on. That tells you that they still had some peace going around. You had some favor with the culture. Some had even taken on some of their beliefs in their gods. Oh, yes, they did. You can read it. Even Rachel and Leah, their daddy had some household gods, some deities that they had swiped and took with them. You know, the daddy was treating them like they were slaves, so they're going to take his priceless household gods. Oh, yeah, they mixed some things, still going on to today, where they say all paths lead to the same God. That's not true. But mankind is trying to make it their way. So if Africa was that bad, why then would they say we need to go back there? And then even so much so, if Africa was that bad, America, the very God that you're talking about, that so many African Americans are saying that this is a white man's religion, I beg to differ. I just told you that they knew that Christ lived, and Africa was one of the first countries. Alexandria was one of the first countries, because Africa, the continent, has countries. Like we have states, they have countries. So we don't want to go there trying to say that they have no value when you came from the same God. And scientists have proven that the mother of all came from Africa. Now, how are you going to distinguish that you're not a part of Africa when you are? You came from the same God. Abraham, all three major religions have come to the truth that Abraham is the father of all of us, after Adam and Eve, of course, but he was the father of many nations. Muslims, the Islams, yes, Muslims, the Jews in Judaism and Christianity, all will acknowledge that. But then you must acknowledge this truth too. Abraham wasn't a Jew. The Jews came from a Gentile. Now, if you look in Jesus' direct lineage, and he took me on an 8.5 hour journey one time, just looking at the women in Jesus' lineage, and you could see a lot of African American chocolate women in his culture. And you're going to see a lot of people that most people, religions wouldn't even have. You had liars. You had people that came from backgrounds where there was incest. There was people that had backgrounds where there were the homosexuality and all these things. So why are you separating people from God's desire to love us? He doesn't like that, dividing us. He said there's certain ways that we have to be in a relationship with him, yes, but he doesn't stop loving us. And this lie that the enemy is trying to perpetrate throughout America, still with this white supremacy stuff, that's a lie. No one is more supreme than the other, but you can't be better than where you came from. There's even a video where there was a wonderful, I call them all, everybody's chocolate, but Caucasian lady. She did these tests was showing, you know, she would do this, like if the blonde hair, blue eyes, she would make the blonde hair, blue eyes children in one moment feel like they're superior to children with brown hair and brown eyes. And then after a while, when they get so arrogant and treating the other children just nasty, she turn around and flip that script and say, now all the blonde eyed, blue eyed children, there's no value to them. They are not worth anything and all of these things. And then these children that was once ridiculed and persecuted now feel superior to the others. She was just showing that the mindset of what the enemy is trying to do to people is a mind game. We say all the time, the enemy can only operate through your mind. That's the only road he can work on. That's just like wicker twisted on that road or by that road in your mind to twist your thoughts. Those children that was blonde hair and blue eyes that the lady, she was teaching them, she's a professor too, was teaching them a truth, because she's not racist at all. She can't stand it. She'll tell you that we are brothers and sisters, we are cousins. That how is it that one moment I tell you the blonde-eyed, blue-eyed children, blonde hair, blue-eyed children are more superior. They treat the other children with brown hair, brown eyes like nothing. And then when she tell them, oh, blonde hair, blue-eyed children, there's nothing to them, they're dumb. And all of these things, all of a sudden, it's switched. That's the trick of the enemy that's happened even in America. Why did anyone feel that it's all right to just beat people, treat people like they're nothing? Even the Egyptians didn't do what has happened in America. They didn't do to the slaves what was happening here. They made them work harder, yes. But they sure didn't try to do the things that was happening here. So, come on, America. Africa had nothing to do with what's going on here. All of these lies and making people think that the word was created just to intimidate. And African brothers and sisters really should seek the face of Christ and see who he really is and see that he didn't tell them to say those things. But yet he kept you with enough truth and always put people in your lives, in our elders' lives, that told them the truth, taught them to read that language. It wasn't that they couldn't read. It wasn't that they were ignorant of anything. They were just new to that culture, learning a new language, learning a new standard. And the gifts that's already there came out. Learning a new thing, just like what we do. Sometimes the Lord will have us in one area where we secure in, and then he takes us to something totally different. It didn't mean that we were incapable. It just means that we're learning a new thing. Now we know even in the New Testament when Jesus came back, we talked about when he said that at one moment he tells his disciples, don't go anywhere but the lost sheep of Israel. He didn't want them to go to the Gentile nations at all. Now it seemed like he was trying to ostracize everyone else. He already knew the truth. He started with the Gentiles. So he's never going to leave us out. But he wanted to win them over, let them know who he was, because they still were stuck on what he said before. He was teaching them his relationship with them, and he was using symbolisms and do the different worships they had and the different sacrifices they had to make for sin and all of these other things. He was letting them know that the only reason why you had gone through this in the first place because you wanted to be like other nations. So, but then he was letting them know that through these symbolisms, I'm going to come back. I'm going to ultimately fulfill all the requirements to get you to be back in place with me. So where did he go? When Herod was trying to kill him off, Herod, that Greek king who was so nasty and vile, doing the very things that people are trying to get rights to do now legally. And come on, we still love everyone, but you didn't have to get a right to do what you were doing anyway. So this is what the propaganda behind it is so sad. People get so upset if you say that you don't agree with a certain thing. They think you don't agree with them, their life, that they exist. That's not true. You love everyone because that could be me. That could be your child. That could be your husband. That could be your daughter or son. You don't stop loving your children because they're doing something you don't like. That just doesn't happen that way. But anyway, so here we were with Herod doing all these vile things with anything and anybody. And if you study King Herod, you'll find out, because he had that Greek culture. How are you? And how are you doing? So glad to see all of you. I might not can see all of your names, but I want to tell you thank you for stopping by and just having a moment with us. But we're talking tonight about, we are talking about what they say, Black history. But we know that every culture has history, and it's just not a month. So the topic tonight is, okay, Africa had nothing to do with you. What did Africa have to do with you? So all of this stuff, and the enemy trying to bring in all this division, still going on today. You still have people coming against someone because of their skin tone. You have people coming against each other because of their lifestyle. You have people trying to prove to others that I was born this way, and others people getting mad because they said, no, you're not. You still got to love everyone because we came from the same God. If I make a choice, if I'm talking about the word of God and you don't agree with it, I'm praying that you still love me, because I'm still going to love you. But anyway, if Egypt was so bad, when Herod was trying to kill Jesus because he knew that there was a new king coming, the wise men, and there were many of them, not just 3 that you hear the songs are being sung, or the Christmas ornaments, the manger scene showing. There was many. And if it wasn't that Egypt was so bad, why would Jesus go and hide there, have his family to hide him there? And it was in Matthew, the 2nd chapter, 13th verse says, after they were gone, an angel of the Lord appeared to Joseph in a dream, saying, get up, take the child and his mother, flee to Egypt, and stay there until I tell you, for Herod is about to search for the child to kill him. So he got up, took the child and his mother during the night, and escaped to Egypt. He stayed there until Herod's death, so that what was spoken by the Lord through the prophet might be fulfilled. Out of Egypt I have called my son. See, the Lord, he knew ahead of time what needed to be done. He didn't want divisiveness among his people. He says one thing bothers him. He forgives us of every sin, every single sin. He will, over and over again, even murder, yes. It's just that when he comes back, he said, don't be doing that no more. Because if you won't have time to get forgiveness, then he right here and right then now. But he forgives of everything. He doesn't want to separate it for no reasons at all. He doesn't even like the fact that the government is exploiting people. That's what they're doing. Yes, it's true. And making them think that everybody is out to ostracize them because they're saying that, because Christian people will reflect on what the Word of God says about certain things. Did it say not to love? It didn't say that. It didn't say to stop loving. It just said because of your beliefs. What he says is not to be is not to be. It didn't say not to love you. So what did these political agendas that they have is this. They exploit certain cultures to get money, to get votes. How are you? To get money, to get votes, and all of these things. And it's going on now. That you got to remember, the Greek and the Roman culture took on the deities, believing in multiplicity of gods from the ancient Egyptians, yes. But in the continent itself, Christianity had already been spread abroad. So just like here, you have the divisiveness of beliefs, you have the divisiveness of gods, who they believe in, and the American culture, let's just be real. If you really want to go there, some that really want to be so religious, if you're that religious, and we talked about it before, then you can't call the days of the week. You cannot name the months of the year. You cannot do any of those things because you're going to say, oh, that day and yesterday and that, because all of the days of the week and the months of the year are Romans. Greek and Roman culture based upon different gods. So if you were going to be that religious, you couldn't stay here. So the Lord is allowing you to know your relationship with Him still allows you to stay in situations and cultures that were not established upon Him. So there are some things we hear all the time that the founding fathers established this nation upon Christian principles. Okay, so upon Christian principles did not entail taking people and using them as property. Worse than that. Just using them for pleasure or to satisfy a greed or to put someone in some subjection or submission because you had anger and viciousness in you. We just said that the Egyptians put more work on the Israelites, but the Lord allowed it to be so. They had gotten hard-headed. They really did. If you read the word, you'll find it. They gotten hard-headed. They had gotten so far from the Lord. They taken up all these other gods. And you remember I said He forgives of everything. He just don't want us to have other gods. So they start taking up all these other worshiping of other deities and everything else. And He knew it. I have to get them back. He already knew the character of this king. He told Moses ahead of time, I'm going to go let you talk to him. He's going to hear what you say, but he's not going to do it. And the Lord wanted to show the Egyptians because He loved them. He had already gone before them. He loved them. He brought Joseph there so to let you know that the relationships was there until this king came. You know, every time there's a changing of guard, new agendas, new policies. And He wanted to show the Egyptians, you got too many gods. I'm your God. I want you to understand. So He showed the plagues of the very things that meant so much to the Egyptians. He used it against them to show them, look, these things are not doing anything for you. And the Egyptians didn't like dirty things. They were not going to bathe in water with blood. They most certainly wasn't going to have flies around their food and their stuff. And they definitely didn't want frogs all over the place. Absolutely not. That was beneath them. And so all these lies that come into so many people's thought process about certain cultures. And like we said before many times, if you look on our Facebook Live on Fridays, you will see, if you go back over there, and we talked about that. There's not a culture that God created as for His people, that there's not some derogatory statement made by someone. But the Lord made us in His image and likeness. For His pleasure, He said we are and were created. So all these lies, Satan, that you are bringing into America, trying to distort God's people, making the African culture feel like they always got to prove themselves that they have value. We tear down your kingdom. We denounce you. All of these viruses you have created because you allowed scientists to be bought out by their enemies to annihilate their own country. We denounce you, Satan. All of this stuff you trying to tear down God's people because of their lifestyles and different things that they have done that they feel guilty of or feel have been ostracized for, family separated from them, and all these sort of things. We denounce you, Satan. As a matter of fact, we declare that this nation is a Christian nation. We understand. I want you all to understand. We came from one God who said that He brought us through two people. Understand, America, that the only thing that Africa has to do with you is that you came from them too. Understand that. They were not brought here to be less than. They're not brought here to be separate than. They were brought here because the Lord allowed it to be. But don't get it twisted that it was for you to get pleasure out of what God had already gotten pleasure out of. And he didn't get pleasure out of being vile and perverse. His pleasure is that we exist. So all of these lies, making people feel small, less than, if they don't have a certain shade of skin, if they don't have a certain hair color or a certain eye color, that is not to be. No longer, ever again. Because we expose you, Satan. The word says clearly, when the thief is recognized, that's when that joker has to pay you sevenfold. That turkey got to pay you sevenfold. Telling lies to God's people. And all these politicians using people because they have the same lifestyle choices, whether it's whatever. They're gamblers, whatever. We're not just talking about sexual exploitations or those that feel like they don't even have gender and all of these things. No. We're not talking about that. We know that there's politics behind this because these things were going on from way back in ancient time. Nothing new. They were doing all of these things. Women were marrying women. Men were marrying men. Some men was already having sexual intercourse with boys. And the same thing was going on now. That going on now went on then. What's the difference, though? The difference is the money, the politics is what is going on, exploiting God's people. People are still trying to, even now to the point, they're using their children because they're in secret societies and all these things, and now they're being caught up in it, and you won't do that lifestyle, but then you allow your child to because that's a sacrifice. The devil is a liar. I'm not saying in every situation, so if anybody ever replay this and said that I'm saying this because of certain stars or saying their child is doing whatever. No, that had nothing to do with them. This was already established even before all of us was created. So the enemy knows what he was doing because he started it with the fallen angels. When you start realizing that sex is not a physical act, it's a spiritual act, you will see. The enemy is a liar. So America, tonight, we're going to say that when we talk about black history, we're talking about all of us because we came from the same God. Oh, I thank you all for joining me. I truly do. I would tell you all the time that you are priceless. You are a jewel. You're beyond any comparison of anything that man can create. God made you in his image and likeness. He said that he created you just because it pleased him. He likes the sound of your voice. He likes everything about you. He loves everything about you. You're a force to be reckoned with. I'm going to tell you this, and it's always true, and it's not going to change. I love you with all of my heart. I really do. But know this. God loved you first, and he loved you best. God bless you. Good night.